The morning sun filtered weakly through the courthouse windows, casting long slants of light across the polished floor. Every seat in the courtroom was filled with journalists, police officers, citizens, and even families with children had come to witness the trial that had divided the small town of Riverton for months. The air was heavy with anticipation, the kind that makes every cough echo, every whisper sound like thunder. At the defense table sat Officer Daniel Hayes, a man once celebrated as a local hero. His uniform, though crisp, carried the weight of shame and exhaustion. Beside him lay his canine partner, Rex, a German shepherd with intelligent eyes and a calm that came only from training and loyalty. Yet today, Rex seemed restless, his gaze shifting between the door and the tense crowd. It was as if he could sense the unease in the air. He knew that something wasn't right. This was no ordinary trial. It had started months earlier when a late-night rescue mission went horribly wrong. A small house on the outskirts of town had caught fire, and inside, a child was trapped. Officer Hayes and Rex were the first to respond. They had gone in through the flames, ignoring protocol and risking their lives. But in the chaos that followed, a misunderstanding spiraled out of control. A bystander, confused and injured during the rescue, had accused Rex of attacking him. The incident turned into a storm of headlines. Hero dog or dangerous canine? Officer Hayes was suspended pending investigation. Videos from that night were blurry, and witnesses disagreed. What had started as a moment of courage had become a public spectacle. Now, this was the final day of the trial, the day when judgment would be passed. The judge, an older man with kind but weary eyes, sat poised behind the bench. He had presided over dozens of difficult cases, but none had drawn so much attention or emotion as this one. Across the room, the prosecutor adjusted his tie, his expression sharp. He had built his argument carefully, portraying Rex as unpredictable and Hayes as reckless. The defense attorney, a calm and seasoned woman named Linda Porter, had fought back fiercely, insisting the officer and his K-9 had done nothing but their duty. But as the case dragged on, the evidence felt stuck in gray areas, no clear video, no solid proof. Just stories. Until that morning, when the defense submitted an unexpected request. One final witness. The room stirred as the judge read the name. The defense calls Lily Sanders. For a moment, there was confusion. No one recognized the name. Then a small voice from the back whispered, "That's the little girl." The crowd turned just as a side door opened. A woman stepped through first Emma Sanders, her face pale but determined. She held the hand of a tiny girl dressed in a simple yellow dress, clutching a warm teddy bear. The little girl's hair was tied into uneven pigtails, and her shoes made soft tapping sounds as she walked. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. A child? How could a child be part of a case like this? The judge frowned slightly, then looked toward the defense attorney. "Ms. Porter, are you certain about this?" Linda nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. The child was present during the incident. Her mother has given consent for her to testify, and I believe her statement could bring clarity to what really happened that night." The judge hesitated, then sighed softly. "Very well. Proceed." Lily was lifted gently onto the witness stand. The chair looked far too big for her tiny frame. The bailiff brought her a small cushion so she could see over the edge of the stand. Everyone's eyes were on her, but she didn't seem scared, just curious. The judge leaned forward kindly. "Hello there, young lady. Do you know where you are today?" Lily nodded, clutching her bear tighter. "Yes, Mommy said this is a place where people tell the truth." A soft chuckle rippled through the crowd. Even the judge smiled faintly. "That's exactly right," he said. "And will you tell us the truth, no matter what?" She nodded again. I promise." From his seat, Officer Hayes felt something shift inside him. He had seen countless witnesses before, but none like this. He remembered the night of the fire, remembered carrying a child through the smoke. Could this little girl really be the same one? The defense attorney began gently. "Lily, can you tell us what you remember from that night?" Lily looked down, her small fingers playing with her teddy bear's ear. "There was smoke," she said softly, "and it was very hot. I was scared." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. Lily continued, her voice steady despite her age. "I called for Mommy, but she didn't come. Then I heard a loud bark. I hid under the bed, and then I saw big eyes. It was him." She pointed across the courtroom. Every head turned toward Rex. The dog tilted his head slightly, as if he recognized the gesture. "That's him," Lily said again, her tone firm for the first time. "He found me." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the prosecutor froze. Officer Hayes felt his throat tighten. He remembered that exact moment, the terrified child, the smoke-filled room, Rex barking frantically to guide him. It had all happened so fast. The defense attorney spoke softly. "Lily, what did the dog do when he found you?" "He didn't bite me," she said quickly, shaking her head. "He barked and licked my hand. Then the man came in." She pointed to Officer Hayes. "He picked me up and took me outside. I saw fire everywhere." The judge's pen stopped moving. The court clerk blinked in disbelief. The defense attorney nodded gently. "And do you remember what happened after that?" Lily thought for a moment. "He gave me to Mommy, and everyone was yelling. But I just hugged my bear. I told Mommy the dog saved me." The courtroom fell silent. The words hung in the air, pure and undeniable. The prosecutor tried to speak, but his voice caught. "Your Honor," the judge raised a hand. "Not now." He looked at the child again. "Lily, do you know why you're here today?" She nodded. "Because people said the dog was bad. But he's not bad. He's a good boy." The entire courtroom exhaled as if releasing a held breath. Some smiled. Others wiped tears. The judge took off his glasses, rubbing his eyes. Officer Hayes lowered his head, his hands trembling slightly. He felt a rush of relief, pride, and deep gratitude. The truth he'd tried to defend for months had finally been spoken, but not by an officer, not by an expert, by a child. Even Rex seemed to understand. His tail wagged faintly, and for the first time in months, the courtroom didn't feel hostile. It felt human. As Lily was led back to her mother, she turned once more toward the officer and waved. "Thank you for finding me." Officer Hayes stood, his voice soft but steady. "No, sweetheart," he said. "Thank you for telling them." The crowd erupted into quiet applause before the judge restored order. But the tone of the trial had changed completely. For the first time, the weight of doubt had lifted. The unexpected witness had arrived, and her innocent truth was about to change everything. The courtroom remained silent long after Lily had been let out. It was the kind of silence that settles when people are unsure whether they've just witnessed something miraculous or heartbreaking. Officer Daniel Hayes sat still, his hands clasped together, his mind spinning with memories he had tried so hard to suppress. Rex, his faithful K-9 partner, sat obediently at his feet. Though the dog didn't understand human law, he seemed to sense the shift in energy. His ears perked up, his eyes bright with alertness, as if waiting for the next command that would make everything right again. Daniel looked down at him, feeling a wave of affection. "You did everything right, boy," he whispered. "Everything." For a year, Daniel and Rex had worked side by side, saving lives, tracking suspects, and protecting the people of Riverton. Their bond was built on trust, a trust forged in fire, fear, and endless training. But now the trust was on trial. When the incident happened, Daniel had been hailed as a hero until confusion twisted everything. That night, the air had been thick with smoke, the house engulfed in flames, and voices screaming from every direction. Rex had run in first, drawn by the scent of a child. Moments later, Daniel followed, finding Rex standing protectively over a small girl beneath a bed. He scooped her up and carried her out through a broken window. But amid the chaos, a man standing nearby, frantic, coughing, and disoriented, had been knocked down by Rex as they exited. Later, that man claimed the K9 had attacked him. A shaky cell phone video captured only the final moments. Rex lunging forward, the man falling, and officers rushing in. It was enough to spark outrage. Within hours, the media had their story. Hero or hazard? Police dog's aggression under fire. Officers K9 attack sparks investigation. Small town questions its own heroes. Daniel's suspension came swiftly. His badge was taken. Rex was confined to the station kennel, labeled a liability. Every newspaper printed his face once, the face of bravery, now shadowed by suspicion. Sitting in that courtroom, Daniel could still hear the whispers. He trained the dog wrong. They covered up the attack. He's dangerous. But he knew the truth. Rex wasn't just a dog, he was a partner, a savior, a living symbol of loyalty. The thought of losing him felt like losing a piece of himself. The prosecutor stood now, voice sharp. Your Honor, while the child's words are emotional, we cannot base our judgment on a 3-year-old's perception of events. The facts? The defense attorney, Linda Porter, interrupted. Her tone was calm but firm. The only undisputed fact is that Officer Hayes and Rex saved that little girl's life. The so-called victim of the dog's aggression refused medical treatment that night and later changed his story 3 times. The prosecutor's jaw tightened. Still, the department protocols were broken. The officer entered a burning structure without backup. Linda nodded. Yes, because waiting for backup would have meant letting a child die. The judge's eyes flickered toward Daniel, then toward the dog at his feet. Officer Hayes, he said quietly, would you like to tell us what happened that night, in your own words? Daniel stood slowly. He wasn't used to defending himself like this. Usually, he was the one standing on the other side of justice, strong, steady, sure. But today, he felt the full weight of doubt pressing on his chest. He glanced at Rex, who gave a small whine, as if sensing his unease. Then Daniel lifted his head and began. It was late around midnight. Dispatch reported a house fire with possible victims trapped inside. When I arrived, the flames were already visible through the roof. I could hear a woman screaming for her child. He paused, swallowing hard. I didn't think. I just acted. Rex caught the scent and ran straight toward the door. He continued, his voice steady but full of emotion. The heat was intense. Visibility was near zero. I called out, but no one answered. Then Rex barked short bursts, sharp and urgent. That's his signal for found someone. I followed the sound and found him standing beside a bed. I saw her Lily. She wasn't moving. He took a deep breath. I picked her up, wrapped her in my jacket, and told Rex to stay close. We went for the nearest exit. The back door was blocked, so we used the window. The prosecutor interrupted. And during that exit, you claim your K9 did not attack anyone? Daniel's eyes flashed. No, he didn't attack anyone. He was doing his job. When we came out, there was smoke everywhere, people running and sirens blaring. A man came toward us, shouting. Rex, thinking there was danger, jumped forward to protect us. He didn't bite. He didn't harm. He reacted like any trained K9 would. The room fell quiet. A prosecutor frowned. "And yet, officer, your dog did knock the man to the ground." "Yes," Daniel admitted. "To shield the child. That man was moving fast, and Rex placed himself between us. I checked on the man immediately. He was shaken, but not hurt." The judge looked thoughtful. "And after that?" "After that," Daniel said softly, "I handed Lily to the paramedics. She was crying, but she was alive. That's all that mattered." He sat down slowly. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the prosecutor seemed to lose his fire. Then a sound broke the silence. A quiet whimper from Rex, who had rested his head on Daniel's boot. The dog's loyalty was unspoken, but clear as daylight. Linda Porter seized the moment. "Your Honor," she said gently, "we've heard from experts, officers, and witnesses. But perhaps the most honest account came from someone who had no reason to lie, a little girl who nearly died that night. She didn't see aggression. She saw protection. She saw a hero." The judge nodded, but said nothing. His gaze lingered on Rex. In the gallery, whispers began again. Some people wiped tears, others exchanged glances. The emotional tide was shifting. The story that had been painted as a scandal now looked very different, a portrait of courage misunderstood. Outside, news cameras waited, hungry for headlines. None of them knew that inside this old courtroom, something real was happening, something rare. As proceedings paused for a short recess, Daniel leaned down and scratched Rex's neck. "Hang in there, buddy," he whispered. "We're almost through this." Rex gave a low, reassuring rumble, his eyes locked on Daniel's face. Daniel looked toward the exit, where Lily had been taken earlier. He remembered her small voice calling him her hero, the way she pointed at Rex with pure admiration. That moment had burned itself into his heart. For months, he had been fighting to clear his partner's name. Now, because of one child's truth, he finally had hope. He straightened his uniform, squared his shoulders, and took a deep breath. The fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time since the fire, Daniel Hayes felt like justice might actually listen. When court resumed, he promised himself one thing. No matter how this ended, he would never let the world forget what Rex had done. Because in that fire, in that smoke, and in that night of chaos, it wasn't a man or a law that saved Lily. It was loyalty, courage, and love. And sometimes, that's all the truth really needs. From her seat in the back row, Emma Sanders could hardly breathe. She had been quiet throughout the trial, barely speaking to anyone. Every question from the lawyers, every objection, every mention of that night felt like a reopening wound. Her heart pounded every time she glanced at the man sitting at the defense table, the officer who had carried her daughter out of the flames. The media had painted him in so many colors: hero, villain, reckless savior. But Emma knew what she saw that night. She saw bravery. She saw a man who didn't hesitate when everyone else froze. And she saw a dog, a creature of instinct and loyalty, who refused to leave her child's side even when the fire roared around them. She remembered that night vividly. Some memories burn into your mind in ways you can't forget, even when you try. It had been a chilly evening. The heater in their small two-bedroom house had been malfunctioning all week, so she had lit a few candles for warmth and light while she put Lily to bed. She had promised herself she'd blow them out before sleeping. But exhaustion had won. She drifted off, unaware that one of the candles had tipped, catching the edge of a curtain. By the time she woke up, smoke had already filled the hallway. Panic tore through her chest as she shouted Lily's name. The sound of crackling fire grew louder, angrier. The air burned her lungs. She tried to reach Lily's room, but the heat forced her back. She remembered stumbling outside, screaming for help. Neighbors had called 911, and within minutes, sirens filled the air. Emma watched helplessly as firefighters and police arrived. Among them was Officer Daniel Hayes and his partner Rex, moving like a single force through chaos. When Daniel saw Emma crying out, he didn't hesitate. He grabbed a mask, called to Rex, and charged into the burning home. The flames were fierce, the smoke impenetrable. Firefighters shouted warnings, but he ignored them. His only focus was the little girl trapped inside. Emma stood frozen on the lawn, clutching her chest, praying louder than she ever had before. Time blurred into minutes that felt like hours. Then through the smoke a sound pierced the night. A bark, sharp, rhythmic, desperate. It was Rex, moments later. Officer Hayes emerged from the front door, covered in soot, coughing violently, but he was holding something in his arms. Lily. Her daughter's face was pale, her small hand clutching her teddy bear, but she was breathing. Emma fell to her knees as he placed the child in her arms. "She's alive," he managed to say before collapsing beside his K9, who was still barking faintly despite his exhaustion. The firefighters rushed forward, treating them all. The smell of smoke clung to their skin for days afterward. Emma had never forgotten the look in Officer Hayes' eyes that night, half relief, half pain. That kind of selflessness wasn't something you could fake. But when she woke the next morning to find news cameras outside her hospital window, everything changed. Reporters wanted statements. Someone had posted a video online showing Rex lunging during the rescue. The headlines twisted the story before she could even speak. People began speculating that the dog had gone wild, that the officer had endangered others. Emma tried to correct them, but no one listened. The story had already been sold. The drama was too irresistible. Weeks passed, and the court case began. Emma stayed silent, believing justice would sort out the lies from the truth. But as she saw the way Officer Hayes was portrayed, her guilt grew heavier. She wanted to help, to tell the world what really happened, but every time she tried, her voice broke. Trauma has a way of silencing even the strongest hearts. Then one night, as she tucked Lily into bed, her daughter said something that stopped her cold. "Mommy," Lily whispered, holding her teddy bear tight. "Why do people say the dog is bad?" "He saved me." Emma's heart clenched. "I know, sweetheart. Some people just don't understand. Can I tell them?" Lily asked innocently. "If I tell them, maybe they'll believe me." It was in that moment Emma realized her daughter's truth carried more power than her own. A mother could be doubted. A witness could be questioned. But the pure voice of a 3-year-old could pierce through disbelief like sunlight through fog. And so she had agreed when the defense attorney called. She sat down with her daughter, explaining gently what it meant to tell the truth in court. She worried Lily would be scared, but her child's courage astonished her. "I'll tell them he's my hero," Lily said. Now, sitting in the courtroom, Emma replayed those words as she watched Officer Hayes testify. His account matched everything she remembered, every detail of smoke, chaos, and courage. When he spoke about Rex's actions, she could see the pain in his eyes, the kind that only comes when a good man is accused of doing wrong. When Lily had walked into the courtroom earlier, clutching her bear, Emma's hands trembled. She wanted to run forward, scoop her up, and protect her from the weight of all those eyes. But then she saw Lily stand tall as a 3-year-old could, and speak with honesty so pure it left grown men speechless. When Lily said, "He's my hero," Emma saw tears on the faces of strangers. When she pointed to Rex and said, "He found me," even the judge seemed to soften. Now, as Daniel finished his own testimony, Emma felt a new emotion swelling inside her hope. Real, trembling hope. For months she had carried guilt, shame, and fear. But now she saw the story shifting. The world was finally seeing what she had seen that night. A man and his dog risking everything for a stranger's child. During a short recess, Emma stepped out into the hallway to breathe. She could hear murmurs from other people waiting outside. "That little girl's testimony changed everything," someone said. "Did you see the look on the judge's face?" Another whispered. Emma pressed her hand over her heart. Maybe, just maybe, the truth would finally be enough. As she waited, she saw Daniel exit the courtroom briefly, Rex walking beside him on a leash. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. But the look they exchanged said everything words couldn't. Gratitude, understanding, respect. Rex approached her slowly, tail wagging faintly. Without thinking, Emma knelt and stroked his fur. "You saved my baby," she whispered. The dog leaned against her hand, eyes closing as if remembering. Daniel nodded quietly. "She's a brave kid," he said. Emma smiled weakly. She learned from the best. When the recess ended and court resumed, Emma took her seat again, this time not as a silent spectator, but as a mother who had witnessed both tragedy and grace. Her heart no longer trembled, it beat with faith. Because sometimes hope doesn't arrive in grand speeches or dramatic confessions. Sometimes it comes in the form of a small child standing in a courtroom, holding a teddy bear, speaking the truth that adults forgot how to see. And as Emma looked toward her daughter, sitting safely beside her now, she knew one thing for certain: no matter what verdict the judge gave, justice had already begun to take shape the moment Lily called a dog her hero. The hum of the ceiling fans was the only sound that filled the courtroom as the judge adjusted his glasses and looked toward the little girl standing near the witness stand. The air felt heavy, as though the very walls were waiting to hear what she would say. People who had come expecting another long, technical day of testimony could not have predicted what they were about to witness. The sight of a 3-year-old in that solemn setting felt surreal. Tiny, fragile, and innocent, Lily stood with her small hands clasped in front of her, a stuffed bear peeking from behind her arm. The bailiff, trying to mask a smile, guided her gently toward the microphone. "Don't be afraid, sweetheart," he whispered softly. "Just tell the truth." Officer Daniel Hayes, sitting at the defense table with his loyal canine, Rex, by his side, could barely breathe. His heart pounded as he watched the child he had once carried out of the smoke now stand before the same system that questioned his actions that night. His hands trembled slightly beneath the table. He remembered every sound, every scream, every second of that burning house. But now, he could only pray that the truth would somehow find its way through the haze of confusion and accusation that had followed him ever since. "Do you know why you're here today, Lily?" The judge asked gently, his voice unusually soft for a courtroom. Lily nodded, her blonde curls bouncing. "To talk about my friend," she said. The judge smiled faintly. "And who is your friend?" She turned and pointed straight toward Rex, the German shepherd sitting beside Officer Hayes. Him. A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. The prosecutor shifted uneasily in his chair, frowning as though trying to process what he had just heard. He had spent weeks constructing a narrative that Rex had gone out of control during the rescue, that his aggression caused harm. But those few innocent words, "my friend," had cracked that narrative wide open. The defense attorney, a composed woman named Laura Mills, glanced at Daniel and gave a small, hopeful nod. She could sense the change in atmosphere, too. "Can you tell us what you remember about your friend?" Laura asked kindly. Lily hesitated for a moment, her gaze dropping to the floor. The courtroom held its breath. Even the sound of the judge's pen tapping on his desk stopped. Then Lily took a small step closer to the microphone. "He found me," she said softly, "when it was dark and scary." Daniel's throat tightened. He remembered that moment vividly, his flashlight beam cutting through the thick smoke, Rex barking and pulling him toward the collapsed hallway. There had been no hesitation, no confusion. Rex had gone straight to the bedroom, scratching and barking, until Daniel kicked open the door. And there, under the bed, was this same little girl, her face covered in soot, clutching her bear. Lily's mother, Emma, sat in the back row, her hands trembling as she pressed them to her lips. Her eyes glistened with tears. She had tried to tell everyone before how the officer and his K9 had risked their lives to save her daughter, but no one had wanted to listen. They had focused instead on the injuries someone else sustained during the chaotic rescue. Now, she silently prayed that her daughter's words would finally be heard. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this is a child. She may not fully understand the circumstances." The judge raised a hand sharply. "Mr. Green, I think we can allow her to continue." His tone left no room for argument. The room quieted again. Lily's small voice carried more weight than any cross-examination that had come before. "It was hot," she continued, "and I was crying. Mommy wasn't there, but I heard barking, loud barking." She turned her gaze to Rex again, her smile faint but genuine. "And he came in. He found me under the bed. He didn't bark, he barked to help." Her words cut through the air like sunlight breaking through clouds. Even the stenographer paused for a second, her fingers hovering above the keys as she tried to catch up. Officer Hayes felt his vision blur. He reached down, gently resting his hand on Rex's head. The dog didn't move, but his ears perked up, his gaze fixed on Lily as if he, too, understood that the truth was finally being spoken. The judge leaned forward, his tone filled with awe. "So Rex found you?" Lily nodded eagerly. "Yes. He licked my hand, and then he barked and barked until the man came." She pointed toward Daniel again. "That man." Every heart in the courtroom melted. The audience sat transfixed, their skepticism dissolving. It was no longer a legal case unfolding before them. It was a story of bravery told through the eyes of a child who had no reason to lie. The prosecutor looked defeated, flipping through his notes as if trying to find something to counter innocence, but nothing came. How could he question a 3-year-old who simply spoke from memory and gratitude? Lavra smiled gently and asked, "Did Rex hurt you or anyone that night?" Lily shook her head firmly. "No, he's a good dog. He saved me." The simplicity of her answer silenced the room completely. The words hung there, echoing in everyone's mind. Even the judge sat back, clearly moved. In the back row, reporters scribbled furiously, their expressions softening as they realized the emotional weight of what they were witnessing. The story they had come to cover, a potential misconduct case, was transforming into something else entirely. A story of redemption, of courage, of truth, spoken through innocence. Daniel wiped at his eyes discreetly. He hadn't cried once since the accusations began, but this moment broke through his restraint. He thought of the months of doubt, of public judgment, of sleepless nights spent replaying that rescue over and over in his head. All of it now began to fade, replaced by the sound of a little girl's voice clearing his name in the most genuine way imaginable. When Lily finished her statement, the judge asked softly, "Do you want to say anything else, young lady?" She thought for a moment, then smiled shyly. "Just that I love Rex. He's my hero." Gasps spread through the courtroom. The judge covered his mouth for a moment, visibly holding back emotion. The jurors glanced at one another, some nodding slightly, as if in silent agreement. There was no confusion, left only truth. The prosecutor didn't object again. Even he seemed to understand that this was no longer about legal technicalities. It was about a moment of raw humanity. The judge finally spoke, his voice gentle but steady. "Thank you, Lily. You've been very brave today." As the bailiff escorted her back to her mother, the audience broke into quiet applause, something rarely allowed in a courtroom, but the judge didn't stop it. He simply let the sound wash over the room, a soft wave of emotion, acknowledging what had just happened. Officer Hayes stood as Lily walked by. She looked up at him with her wide, trusting eyes, and for a brief second, time seemed to stop. She reached out her tiny hand, and Rex leaned forward, licking her fingers once. The courtroom collectively exhaled, a mixture of relief and admiration filling the space. Emma gathered her daughter into her arms, whispering, "You did so good, baby. You told the truth." From that moment, everyone in the courtroom knew the tide had turned. The truth had finally been set free, not through evidence or cross-examination, but through the honesty of a child's heart. And as Officer Hayes sat down again, one thought filled his mind. Sometimes, it takes the smallest voice to speak the loudest truth. For a moment, after little Lily's testimony, no one moved. The courtroom remained frozen in silence, like time itself had paused to take in what had just happened. The judge leaned back in his chair, visibly emotional. The prosecutor shuffled his papers, but even he couldn't hide the weight of what the child's words had done. There was something pure, something unquestionable, in the way Lily had spoken, without hesitation, without agenda, just truth. Officer Daniel Hayes sat motionless beside Rex, his hand resting gently on the canine's fur. He could feel Rex's steady breathing beneath his palm, calm and loyal as ever. This dog, his partner, his friend, had endured months of suspicion. Now, for the first time, Daniel saw a glimmer of hope that their nightmare might finally end. The judge cleared his throat softly. "Let the record show that the child witness's statement was heard without objection and will be entered in full," he said. His voice, though formal, carried an undertone of compassion. He turned toward the jury box. "You may consider her testimony in your deliberations." Then he looked directly at Officer Hayes. "Sergeant Hayes, your canine seems to have left quite an impression today." Daniel managed a faint, weary smile. "He always does, Your Honor," he said quietly. Laughter rippled softly across the room, brief, genuine, a release from the tension that had been building for weeks. But for Daniel, the moment meant much more than relief. His mind drifted back to that night, the thick smoke curling around him, the heat that made his skin sting, and Rex barking fiercely, guiding him through the chaos. He remembered how they'd pushed through a collapsed hallway, how Rex had scratched at the floor near the bed, refusing to leave until Daniel looked beneath it. That's when he'd seen her Lily, unconscious but alive. He could still hear Rex's frantic barks echoing through the burning house, could still feel the weight of the small girl in his arms as he carried her outside. It had been the proudest moment of his life. And then days later, it had all turned into a nightmare. The media had twisted the story. A witness had claimed that Rex attacked someone outside the burning home in confusion. The department, under pressure, had suspended both Daniel and Rex pending investigation. The city that once praised them had started whispering about recklessness, about danger. It had cut deeper than any wound Daniel had ever suffered in the line of duty. Now, seeing the courtroom beginning to understand, Daniel's chest filled with emotion he could barely contain. He turned slightly to look at Lily, now sitting quietly beside her mother. Her small hands clutched her stuffed bear again, and she was smiling faintly innocent, unaware that she had just rescued him as much as he had once rescued her. The defense attorney, Laura Mills, stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor," she began, "I'd like to request permission to play a piece of audio from Officer Hayes' body camera on the night of the rescue. It may help the court visualize the event through the eyes of those who were there." The prosecutor hesitated for a moment, then nodded. No objection. The judge gestured for her to proceed. Lavra pressed play on the small speaker. The sound of chaos filled the courtroom, the roar of fire, the crackling of wood, the frantic breathing of a man fighting through smoke. Then, clear and piercing, came Rex's bark, sharp, urgent, unrelenting. "Good boy, Rex. Find her." Daniel's voice echoed from the recording, strained and desperate. Seconds later, a muffled cry was heard, a child's faint whimper, and then Daniel's shout. "I got her. I got the girl." The courtroom was silent, every face turned toward the speaker, every heart pulled into that terrifying night. The audio ended, leaving behind an eerie stillness. The judge exhaled slowly. "That was powerful." Lavra nodded. "Your Honor, the prosecution's case hinges on the idea that Rex lost control that night. I think this recording, combined with the child's first-hand memory, shows that the only thing Rex lost was time, the seconds it took to save a life." The prosecutor rose slowly, his expression unreadable. "Your Honor, while the department procedures may not have been followed perfectly that night, it's evident now that the intention behind every action was rescue, not harm." The words hung in the air. Coming from the very man who had built the case against Daniel, it was an admission that spoke volumes. Emma, Lily's mother, covered her mouth with both hands. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't care. Months of frustration, fear, and guilt washed away in a flood of relief. She turned to her daughter and whispered, "You did it, baby. You told them the truth." Little Lily leaned against her mother's shoulder. "Rex is happy now," she whispered back, her eyes following the dog who had saved her life. Daniel closed his eyes, overwhelmed. He'd spent countless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if people would ever believe him again. And now, in one afternoon, a 3-year-old had done what his lawyers, reports, and statements could not. She had reminded everyone what really mattered. As the session continued, witnesses were called to confirm Lily's account. Firefighters testified how Rex had guided them through the home. One even said, "That dog was a hero, sir. Without him, we might not have found the girl in time." The judge nodded thoughtfully after each testimony. The courtroom's mood had shifted entirely. Where there had once been suspicion, there was now admiration. As the final witness stepped down, Lavra stood again for closing remarks. "Your Honor, members of the court," she began, her voice steady but emotional. "We often talk about truth as something complex, something that needs to be proven. But sometimes, truth is simple. It can come from the words of a child. It can come from a single act of courage. Officer Hayes and K9 Rex didn't act recklessly. They acted heroically. They followed their training, their instincts, and their hearts. And today, that truth has finally spoken for itself." A quiet murmur of agreement swept through the spectators. Even the judge appeared moved, his stern expression softened by the weight of the moment. Daniel glanced down at Rex. The dog looked up at him with calm, intelligent eyes, as if sensing the change in the air. For months, Rex had endured whispers and judgment he could never understand. Now, finally, he could hold his head high again. As the court adjourned for the day, Daniel stood, his legs unsteady. Reporters waited near the doors, cameras flashing. But before he could leave, a small voice called out, "Mr. Hayes." He turned. Lily was standing near the aisle, clutching her mother's hand. She gave a tiny wave. Daniel smiled and knelt down. Rex trotted forward, tail wagging. Lily reached out and petted his head gently. "You're still my hero," she said. For the first time in months, Daniel laughed. Not out of relief or exhaustion, but from something deeper. Gratitude. The bailiff called for order as the next session was set to begin. But in that small exchange, something had already been decided, not legally, but in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it. That day, no one left the courtroom unchanged. The officers saw courage in a new form. The reporters saw truth in its purest light. And Daniel Hayes saw proof that even when the world doubts you, faith and innocence can bring justice back to life. The next morning, the courthouse buzzed like a hive. Reporters filled the hallways, their cameras poised, their voices echoing as they whispered about the little girl and the police dog who had melted an entire courtroom's heart. The case that had once been just another controversy had now become a symbol of innocence and truth. Inside courtroom 3B, sunlight filtered through tall windows, painting golden streaks across the polished floor. Officer Daniel Hayes sat at the defense table, his hands clasped together tightly. Beside him lay Rex, calm and composed, his leash resting loosely around Daniel's wrist. The loyal German shepherd looked every bit the hero he was. But there was still a shadow hanging over them. The case wasn't officially closed yet. The judge entered, and the murmuring crowd quickly fell silent. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes carried the same compassion they had the day before. Court is now in session, the bailiff announced, his voice steady and deep. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. Today would decide everything: his badge, his honor, his partner's life. Months of pain, doubt, and humiliation had led to this single day. The prosecutor, Mr. Green, rose first. There was something different in his tone, this time less sharp, more thoughtful. "Your Honor," he began, "yesterday's testimony from the child witness gave this court something we rarely see: truth, pure and unfiltered. I reviewed the evidence again last night, along with the footage and the statements from the fire department. I have come to the conclusion that our initial interpretation may have been mistaken." A ripple of whispers swept through the courtroom. Daniel felt his breath catch. Was this really happening? Mr. Green continued, "It is now clear that the K9, Rex, acted in direct response to his partner's command and performed his duty with loyalty and precision. Any harm caused during the chaos was incidental, not intentional. I therefore move to withdraw the primary charges of misconduct against Officer Hayes and K9 Rex." For a moment, no one moved. Even the stenographer froze, her fingers hovering over the keys. Then, like a gentle wave breaking the silence, applause began to spread across the room, quiet at first, then building as relief washed over everyone present. The judge raised his hand, smiling faintly. "Order," he said, though his tone carried no real authority, only warmth. "I will allow it. But let the record show that this case reminds us of something vital. Justice is not just about evidence, it is about understanding." Daniel lowered his head, overwhelmed. His eyes stung, but for once, the tears weren't from frustration, they were from relief. He turned to Rex, who looked up at him with his usual calm gaze. "We did it, buddy," Daniel whispered. "We finally did it." Rex wagged his tail, the faint thump against the floor sounding almost like applause of its own. Across the aisle, Lily and her mother sat quietly, watching. Emma held her daughter close, pride shining in her eyes. The little girl was swinging her legs beneath the bench, her bear resting in her lap. When Daniel's gaze met hers, she grinned and gave him a tiny thumbs up. Laura, the defense attorney, stood next. Her usually steady voice trembled with emotion. "Your Honor, if I may," she began. "This case has been difficult for everyone involved. It's tested our faith in justice, our trust in each other, and the bond between man and animal. But what has brought us to this moment is not law, it's humanity. The courage of a child, the loyalty of a dog, and the perseverance of an officer have reminded us what service and truth truly mean." She paused, glancing back toward Lily. Sometimes the purest testimony doesn't come from the trained or the experienced, it comes from the innocent. The judge nodded deeply. "Beautifully said, Counselor." Then he turned to Daniel. Officer Hayes, it seems your faith in your partner was not misplaced. You and Rex have reminded this court of the sacred bond between those who protect and those they serve. He smiled faintly. This court formally dismisses all charges against you and your canine partner. You are free to return to duty, with full honors restored. The room erupted again, not with noise, but with emotion. Even those who had doubted Daniel now stood, clapping with genuine respect. For months, he had been painted as reckless, accused of losing control. Now, he stood as what he had always been, a man who never gave up doing what was right. Daniel's knees nearly gave out as he stood. He turned to Lavra, shaking her hand firmly. "Thank you," he whispered, "for believing in us." She smiled. "I didn't just believe in you, officer. I believed in what was true." As they gathered their things, the judge motioned toward the bench. "Before we adjourn, I think there's one more piece of business." The bailiff brought forward a small medal, shining gold under the courtroom lights. "This medal," the judge said, holding it up, "is awarded to officers who show extraordinary courage in the face of danger. Officer Hayes, I believe both you and Rex have more than earned it." The applause grew louder this time, cheers even. Cameras clicked as Daniel stepped forward. He took the medal in trembling hands, then looked down at Rex and smiled. "This belongs to both of us, partner." The judge nodded approvingly. "Indeed it does." When the session ended, reporters flooded the hallways, microphones thrust forward, flashes of light capturing every moment. But Daniel wasn't thinking about the cameras. He wasn't thinking about his career or the headlines. He was thinking about one small girl and one big-hearted dog. Outside on the courthouse steps, Emma and Lily waited. The crowd parted to let them through. Lily ran up, her tiny shoes pattering against the stone. "Rex!" she shouted joyfully. The dog's ears perked up, and before Daniel could react, Rex bounded forward, tail wagging furiously. He stopped right in front of her, lowering his head. Lily giggled and wrapped her arms around his neck. "I missed you," she whispered. Daniel laughed softly. "He missed you too." Emma approached, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Officer Hayes," she said quietly, "I don't think there are words for what you did, for saving her life, and for what you went through after." Daniel shook his head. "You and your daughter did more than I ever could. You reminded everyone that truth still matters." Reporters captured the moment, the little girl hugging the dog who had saved her life. The officer smiling proudly beside them, the golden medal gleaming in the sun. Within hours, the image would spread across the nation. Little girl's testimony clears hero, officer, and canine partner. But in that moment, none of them were thinking about headlines. They were just people, bound by an experience that would stay with them forever. As the crowd began to disperse, Lily tugged at Daniel's sleeve. "Mr. Hayes," she said softly. "Yes, sweetheart? Can Rex come to my birthday?" Daniel chuckled. "You bet he can. He wouldn't miss it for the world." Rex barked once, as if in agreement, and everyone laughed as they walked down the courthouse steps. Daniel looked up at the clear blue sky. The weight he had carried for so long was finally gone. He had his name back, his honor, his partner, and the peace of knowing that truth had prevailed. But more than anything, he had a reminder that sometimes the loudest lies can be silenced by the smallest voices. The story spread faster than anyone expected. By the following morning, the photo of 3-year-old Lily hugging Rex on the courthouse steps had appeared on nearly every major news outlet across the country. Headlines read, "Toddler's testimony saves hero K9, and innocence restores justice." What had begun as a local courtroom drama had now become a national symbol of truth, courage, and redemption. Officer Daniel Hayes woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing non-stop. Messages poured in from fellow officers, family members, and even strangers from across the United States. Some were veterans, others firefighters or teachers, all expressing how deeply this story had moved them. "You reminded us why we serve," one message read. Another simply said, "Thank you for not giving up." Daniel sat on his porch, coffee in hand, Rex lying contentedly at his feet. The morning sun cast long, warm rays across his front yard. For the first time in months, there was peace in his heart. Rex looked up at him, tail thumping lazily against the porch floor, as if he too felt the calm after the storm. "You did good, partner," Daniel said softly, scratching behind Rex's ears. "You always do." Across town, Lily and her mother, Emma, were sitting at the kitchen table, the morning news playing in the background. The anchor's voice was gentle and emotional, in a world often clouded by conflict and misunderstanding. One child's innocent words have reminded us that sometimes the simplest truth comes from the smallest voices. Emma smiled, brushing Lily's curls from her face. "That's you, sweetheart," she whispered. Lily looked up with sleepy eyes. "Are we on TV again?" Emma laughed. "Yes, you are. You and Rex." Lily giggled. "He's famous now." Emma nodded. "You both are, in a way. But it's not about being famous, honey. It's about helping people see what's right." The little girl thought for a moment, then said with pure sincerity, "I just told the truth." Those words struck Emma harder than she expected. That was exactly it. In a courtroom filled with rules, adults, and endless debate, a child had spoken with clarity that no one could refute. Meanwhile, at the police precinct, things had changed too. Officers who had once avoided eye contact with Daniel now greeted him with respect. When he walked in with Rex that morning, the entire station stood and applauded. It wasn't rehearsed, it came from the heart. "Welcome back, Hayes," his captain said, shaking his hand firmly. "You've always had this department's trust, but now the whole country knows what kind of man and what kind of team you really are." Daniel smiled modestly. "Thank you, sir. I'm just glad it's over." The captain looked down at Rex, who was now wagging his tail happily, and grinned. "You know, the mayor called this morning. They're planning an award ceremony next week. Said they want to honor you both officially for what you did." Daniel chuckled. Rex is going to love that. He's always been a fan of applause. But beyond the recognition and praise, what touched Daniel the most were the letters that began arriving, handwritten notes from children, families, and even firefighters who had been rescued in the past. One letter, written in a shaky hand by an elderly woman, sighed, "I lost faith in justice a long time ago, but your story reminded me that good people still exist." Another, from a child Lily's age, simply read, "Dear Officer Hayes, thank you for being brave. Tell Rex I love him." Daniel read every one of them, carefully stacking them on his desk as reminders that the truth had power far beyond the courtroom walls. Days passed, and the story continued to ripple outward. Talk shows invited Emma and Lily to share their experience, but Emma politely declined most offers. "It's not a story to sell," she told Daniel over the phone. "It's a lesson to remember." Daniel couldn't agree more. "That's what makes it special," he said. One quiet afternoon, a knock came at his door. When Daniel opened it, Emma and Lily were standing there, holding a small envelope. Rex barked softly in greeting, tail wagging as he recognized them. "Hey there," Daniel said, surprised but delighted. "What brings you two by?" Lily grinned and held out the envelope. "It's an invitation." Daniel raised an eyebrow and opened it. Inside was a hand-drawn card decorated with bright crayon colors, balloons, hearts, and stick figures. In the center were the words, "Rex's best friend birthday party. You're invited." Daniel laughed. Your birthday's this weekend? Lily nodded eagerly. I want Rex to come. He has to come. He saved me. Emma smiled warmly. We'd be honored if you both came. Daniel knelt beside Rex and looked into his loyal partner's eyes. What do you think, buddy? You up for a party? Rex gave a soft bark, and Lily squealed in delight. That's a yes, she said, jumping up and down. A party that weekend was small but beautiful. In Emma's backyard, balloons floated lazily in the breeze, and laughter filled the air. Lily ran around in a little pink dress, showing everyone her hero friend. Rex, the dog, sat proudly, a blue ribbon tied around his neck, while children took turns petting him and giving him treats. Daniel stood beside Emma, watching with quiet contentment. She looks happy, he said. Emma nodded. She hasn't had nightmares since the trial. I think seeing Rex again gave her peace. Daniel smiled faintly. He has that effect on people. For a moment, they just watched in silence. The little girl playing with her hero, the sun shining softly through the trees, laughter echoing across the yard. It felt like everything had finally come full circle. Later, as the evening settled in, Lily climbed onto a chair and clinked a plastic cup to get everyone's attention. I have to say something, she announced, her tiny voice carrying over the crowd. Everyone quieted. I just want to thank Rex for saving me, she said, her voice trembling slightly. And thank you, Mr. Hayes, for helping him. You're both my heroes. Daniel's throat tightened as everyone clapped. He smiled at Lily, his heart full. Thank you, sweetheart, he said softly. But you're the brave one. You told the truth when it mattered most. As the evening faded into twilight, Daniel sat on the porch with Emma and watched the children chase fireflies. The sky glowed orange and purple. Rex lay beside them, his head resting on his paws, his eyes half closed in peace. Emma turned to Daniel. You know, I've been thinking, she said. Sometimes the truth doesn't need to be shouted. It just needs to be spoken by someone pure enough to believe in it. Daniel nodded slowly. And sometimes, he replied, it takes a child to remind us that doing the right thing doesn't need to be complicated. They both fell silent, listening to the soft laughter in the yard. For Daniel, it was more than a moment of closure. It was a reminder that justice, no matter how tangled or delayed, always found its way home. The world had seen one little girl change everything with a few simple words. And for Officer Hayes, that truth would never fade. It was proof that light could come from the smallest spark, that even in the darkest moments, innocence had the power to heal what was broken. And as the stars appeared above, Rex let out a soft sigh and closed his eyes, his job finally done for now. Months passed since the courtroom scene that had changed so many lives. But the echoes of that moment, the sight of a little girl standing before a police dog and speaking words that turned injustice into hope, didn't fade away. Instead, it grew. It spread across towns, across states, until it became something much bigger than the story of one child and one K-9. It became a reminder of how truth, love, and courage could move the world. Officer Daniel Hayes didn't realize how far the story had gone until one morning, while sipping coffee at a diner, a stranger approached him. The man was in his 50s, wearing a faded veteran's jacket and carrying a gentle smile. You're Officer Hayes, aren't you? He asked, voice warm, but trembling slightly. Daniel nodded. Yes, sir. The man extended his hand. I just wanted to thank you and that little girl. My grandson watched your story on TV. He's been quiet since his dad passed away, but after seeing how brave that child was, he started talking again. He said, if she can tell the truth, so can I. You gave him courage, son. Daniel didn't know what to say. He shook the man's hand, his throat tightening. That one small act of innocence in court had touched people in ways he couldn't have imagined. Meanwhile, Rex became somewhat of a celebrity. At community events, children lined up to meet him. Schools invited Daniel and Rex to speak about honesty and courage. But it wasn't about fame, it was about connection. Everywhere they went, Daniel could see how the story gave people hope. At one elementary school, Daniel shared the story of that day in court. The auditorium was filled with wide-eyed children, some sitting cross-legged on the floor, others perched on their knees. Sometimes, he said, doing the right thing can be scary. But courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you tell the truth anyway. A little girl in the front row raised her hand. Did the dog know she was scared? She asked. Daniel smiled. I think he did. Dogs feel things. But Rex wasn't just protecting her, she was protecting him too. That's what friendship means? The room fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted in applause. After the talk, a teacher approached him. You know, she said softly, you're changing more lives than you realize. That little girl gave people faith again. You and Rex gave them proof that goodness still wins. Back home, Daniel's life slowly returned to normal morning jogs with Rex, coffee on the porch, patrol duty around town. But one thing had changed permanently, his sense of purpose. He no longer saw his job as just enforcing the law. He saw it as protecting truth itself, in whatever form it came. Then, one afternoon, he received a letter with a familiar handwriting. It was from Emma, Lily's mother. Inside was a photo. Lily and Rex, both smiling, her tiny arms wrapped around his neck. On the back, Emma had written, "She still talks about her hero every day." Daniel smiled as he placed the photo on his desk beside his badge. It reminded him that even small acts could ripple across time, touching hearts he'd never meet. Months later, a new program was launched in their city. The mayor called it the Truth and Courage Initiative. It was designed to teach children about honesty, empathy, and standing up for what's right. To Daniel's surprise, the mayor asked him and Rex to be the faces of the campaign. At the ceremony, a large crowd gathered in front of City Hall. News crews filmed, families clapped, and banners fluttered in the breeze. On stage, the mayor spoke. Today, we honor the bravery of a little girl and her four-legged friend, who reminded us all that courage doesn't depend on age or size. It depends on heart. He gestured for Daniel to come forward. Officer Hayes, Rex, thank you for restoring faith and justice. Your story will live on in every classroom that teaches children to speak the truth. Daniel stepped up to the microphone, Rex sitting loyally beside him. For a moment, he couldn't find the words. The crowd waited quietly, the sun casting a golden glow over the steps. Finally, he said, I've been in this uniform for a long time. I've seen a lot of darkness. But what that little girl taught me is that light doesn't always come from where you expect it. Sometimes it comes from the smallest voice, the one brave enough to tell the truth. The applause was thunderous. Even Rex barked once, earning laughter and cheers from the audience. After the ceremony, reporters surrounded Daniel. One asked, Do you think the story changed anything in the justice system? Daniel paused thoughtfully. Maybe not the system overnight, he said. But it changed people, and people are where change begins. That night, Daniel sat at home watching the evening news. They showed clips of the event, and then an interview with Emma and Lily. The reporter knelt beside the little girl and asked, Lily, what made you tell the truth that day? Lily smiled shyly. Because Rex looked sad, she said simply. And when someone's sad, you should help them. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. The purity of her answer summed up everything. She didn't think about laws or fear or fame. She thought about kindness. Time passed, and life moved forward. Lily started school, Rex continued to serve, and Daniel eventually took a position training new K-9 officers. He taught them not only about commands and obedience, but about the bond between a handler and a dog, the unspoken trust that could change lives. Years later, when Lily turned 8, she wrote Daniel a letter of her own. The handwriting was wobbly but heartfelt. "Dear Officer Hayes, I'm in 2nd grade now. I still remember when you and Rex helped me. I want to be a police officer when I grow up, so I can help people too. Tell Rex I love him. Your friend Lily?" Daniel kept that letter close. Sometimes, when he doubted the world, he'd read it again and remember that a child's heart could be stronger than any weapon, louder than any argument. Rex grew older, his fur whitening around the muzzle, but his spirit never dimmed. When he finally retired, the town held a ceremony for him too. Children from the local schools, many of whom had grown up hearing his story, made posters and cards that read, "Thank you, Rex, and our hero forever." Daniel stood beside him, fighting back tears as the crowd cheered. When the mayor asked if he wanted to say a few words, Daniel shook his head, then leaned down to whisper in Rex's ear, "We did good, partner. Real good." Years later, long after Rex had passed peacefully in his sleep, Daniel still walked by the courthouse sometimes. He'd stop by the exact spot where Lily had stood years ago. The old oak bench was still there, and so was a small brass plaque the city had placed beneath it. It read, "In honor of truth spoken with courage, Lily and Rex, 2023. Every time Daniel saw it, he felt something rise in his chest, a mixture of pride, love, and quiet faith in humanity. He knew the world would always have lies, corruption, and fear. But he also knew that somewhere out there, another small voice would rise when it mattered most. And that would be enough. As the sun set over the courthouse one evening, Daniel stood there in silence, hat in hand. The sky glowed orange and pink, the wind rustling through the trees. He smiled faintly and said, "You changed everything, kiddo." And somewhere in the distance, he could almost hear a child's laughter and the soft, steady bark of a loyal friend, echoes of a truth that would never fade. The end.